Hello, Fiedelbogen here, to my fellow workers in the vineyard worldwide. Greetings. Today's talk poses for consideration the question, is feminism a good thing? So, where is feminism's Achilles heel? If we could smite our enemy in just one place and drill that place unmercifully open, wider and deeper, until our enemy keeled over dead, where do you suppose we ought to strike? Have you got any ideas about that? Well, I have a few. In fact, I believe feminism has many possible Achilles heels. I've thought of several, and today I'd like to examine just one. But I would first remind you of the painfully evident that by the rules of the present age you cannot attack feminism. It is out of bounds to do so, socially prohibited to do so, culturally interdicted to do so. You might as well urinate on the Mona Lisa. Such would be the magnitude of the sacrilege. And yet there is no escape hatch. For to capitulate in despair is not an option. To plead futility is not an option. To turn the other cheek is not an option. Attack you must, or you will be attacked, and they will slowly, patiently, persistently grind you into sawdust. But you already knew that, didn't you? So, the only way out is forward. We are saddled with the burden of investigation, and the task is twofold. Firstly, we must inquire to know how the world maintains feminism on its altar of untouchable sanctitude. Secondly, we must inquire to know how we might deactivate the mechanism described in the first part. We begin with a simple observation that the word feminism, just the word, is a shibboleth, a widely held belief that interferes with the ability to speak or think about things without preconception. Feminism is not simply a word, it is a hot potato, a word with connotations, a word with baggage, a word with a muddled and controversial belief system which stands behind it. And thanks to the muddle and controversy, hardly anybody remains fully rational when the shibboleth is spoken. Far too much is at stake for most people to speak or think without preconception. When this word vibrates in the air, you can feel an iron cage sliding into place around people's heads. The clang is nearly audible. In fact, the word is rarely spoken in common settings, but when it is, it generates a discomfort zone at which people will silently agree to not go there and quickly change the subject. A shibboleth is meant to separate one demographic sector from another by means of a test. In the celebrated Old Testament story, wrong pronunciation of this word would betray you as a foreigner. Nowadays, the word feminism serves analogously, although pronunciation is no longer under scrutiny, but rather a psychic undertone that signals membership or non-membership in a certain cultural paradigm. This word and the emotion it triggers divides the world into two distinctly polarized socio-political groupings, meaning that the ensemble of varied opinions within each group will cluster around the word feminism with a signature unique to that group and markedly unlike the opposing group. The shibboleth separates the oil from the water due to the feelings and associations it conjures. In keeping with the system laid down elsewhere, I will call these socio-political groupings the feminist sector and the non-feminist sector. The terms establish a polarity, but note that a middle zone lies between the extremities, a non-activated region composed of people who either have no opinion about feminism or an opinion that leans only weakly in either direction but remains unmarked by appreciable passion. Yet, in the fullness of time, owing to certain developments, we may expect this middle zone to grow more and more activated, more galvanized, so that a sharper boundary will emerge between the feminist and the non-feminist sectors. I, the present speaker, used to be in that middle zone of lukewarm opinion described above. I am a living case of the transformation that can occur. The feminist sector morally dominates and intimidates the non-feminist sector by reason of its organization, infiltration of the media, penetration of state apparatus, group consciousness, group solidarity, and so on. Therefore, the feminist sector enjoys a power advantage. The non-feminist sector submits meekly to a feminist hegemony because, stated simply, it has no collective self-awareness and does not understand the structure of the opposing power. Furthermore, it is prey to a certain emotion that I will call superstition. All of this and more explains why it is socially taboo to attack or even mildly criticize feminism, because there is a comparative power vacuum on the non-feminist side, whose only resource is passive numbers. So the non-feminist sector, in its political inertia, cannot muster any will to assert the contrary, and therefore the feminist sector, being the only assertive party, wins by default. To sum up, feminism is, for the feminist sector, a sacred ox. And heaven help us, but thou shalt not gore, the sacred ox. And the followers of this ox have turned their worship into a virtual state religion, a cult whose power, mystery, mana, gravitas, hierophantic mumbo-jumbo, and so on, have inspired in the minds of many people the emotion called superstition, all of which is a complicated way of saying that they have arrogated the moral high ground on a dubious warrant, and gulled a lot of people into playing their game. Understand that it makes no part of the present talk to inquire into the history behind this. We don't care to know how it came to be this way, but rather how it remains this way. How, we would like to know, does the device sustain and renew itself day in and day out? The answer is that feminism occupies the moral high ground by a semantic trick that is simple to comprehend. Consider once again that feminism is a sacred ox. In common with cultists everywhere, the followers of this ox cult have entrusted their lives to the power of a fixed idea, or more accurately, many such ideas, but only one of these will concern us now because it is pivotal and uniquely consequential. Briefly, the worshippers of the feminist ox embrace the fixed idea that feminism is a good thing. Feminism is a good thing. That's what they say. The fixed idea makes the sacred ox sacred. It must be a good thing, or why would anybody worship it? This idea is anchored to the bedrock with steel bolts. The thought that feminism could be other than a good thing cannot meaningfully exist for them at all. Any such possibility is ruled out of consideration and therefore unavailable for discussion. Such is the semantic trick. The rest is details, and I will look into some of these. For many years, the feminists have drilled and instilled the idea that feminism is pro-woman. That is another way of saying that feminism is a good thing, because pro-woman certainly means good for women. right? And they so far contrive to sell this idea that they presume to call themselves the women's movement. In this way, they have stuck a label on a bottle to distract attention from what the bottle actually contains. For if feminism is pro-woman, as the label seems to imply, then by clear insinuation it follows that whosoever speaks against feminism is anti-woman. Do you see how that works? Sneaky, isn't it? On the identical principle, I could start a movement called the Good Guys. Then I and my good guys could be any kind of bastards we wanted to be, and since we were the good guys, nobody would dare to speak against us. Less hypothetical would be the term progressive, which is a name that an actual political tribe has bestowed on itself. Clearly, if you aren't one of this tribe, you are regressive, correct? Precious little choice they give you. Be one of us or be damned. But to commandeer the moral high ground by semantical handy-dandy is nothing new. Human beings have been practicing that little dodge for as long as they've been practicing politics, which is a long time. In the case of feminism, the trick is more subtle because unlike, say, good guys, the term feminism carries no self-evidential or prima facie recommendation. The idea that feminism is a good thing is a sociological myth that was cemented into place by a lot of work over the years. They had to make it stick, but they have succeeded, for it is now stuck very well indeed. So, in order to break free from this deceitfully constructed mental logjam, we need to pose certain questions. For example, you say that feminism is pro-woman, but what else is it? What's wanted here is a full disclosure of ingredients. What else is in the bottle? If the feminists are not forthcoming upon this point, then I must make my own examination. And if, having done so, I conclude that feminism ought to be rejected out of hand owing to some other things which it contains, this will shift the burden on to the feminist to rationalize the presence of those other things. At this stage, feminism would need to undergo a self-criticism, an identity crisis, a self-redefinition, or else incur the risk of a wholesale and warrantable repudiation by the non-feminist sector. To ask, is feminism a good thing, is very little different than to ask, is X a good thing? One must inquire to know the value of X, and by that value I mean everything which feminism might plausibly be shown to contain. X means the whole truth and nothing but the truth about feminism. The quest for the value of X and the contest to assign this value we call the battle for feminism's soul. In the feminist mind, there is a cognitive disconnection between what feminism means to them and what feminism is in fact. The shibboleth enforces a deeply cloven and profoundly consequential split in feminist cognition between the subjective and objective dimensions of knowledge. If it often appears that feminists are living in their own world, it is because they are, in fact, doing so. They refuse to process signals from the non-feminist sector, and it does not occur to them that such feedback could be objectively explanatory of the nature of feminism itself. This betrays a one-sidedness, an arrogance, a hubris, a perverse subjectivity. To the feminist mindset, the fixed idea that feminism is a good thing invalidates all contrary data. and by the same stroke it invalidates all human expounders of such data. Plainly stated, you are worth hearing only insofar as you rubber stamp the feminist worldview. And when push comes to shove, one easily foretells that feminism will try to run non-feminism straight into the ground. For being feminism, it can scarcely behave otherwise. It is not difficult to discern the shape of feminist metaethics and to fast forward its probabilities into the future for an extrapolated view of the eventual consequences. All of this from an ideology which arrogates a universal power of moral explanation. But however far feminism might aspire to become the world or pretend to be the world, it is in fact not the world. It is only a mental filter, a set of tinted goggles that certain people insist on wearing for personal reasons. Reasons that would be of scant interest were it not for the political power the illusion has garnered. So, how does this illusion function in practice? By what steps does the believer assemble the illusion in his or her mind, and then launch it into operation? Here is the recipe. Begin with the fixed idea that feminism is a good thing. Once you have that part nailed down, you can directly derail any suggestion to the contrary, because the axiom that feminism is a good thing immediately proves those people wrong. Moreover, since they are attacking a good thing, it demonstrates not only that their ideas are wrong, but that they themselves are personally not right, and therefore cannot possibly have right ideas. Because how can wrong people have right ideas? Right? Sounds moronically simple, but since these people are apt to be subtle morons, we must explore some further wrinkles. For example, if some challenger rattles off 3 or 4 reasons why feminism is not a good thing, assure that person that the items in question are either A, not really feminism, or B, some other kind of feminism, but not your kind. Then dismiss the subject as quickly as possible and proceed to accentuate the positive by lauding the merits of your feminism while paying no further mind to your challenger's objections, and indeed washing your hands of those objections altogether. Finally, bask in the warm afterglow of knowing that feminism is a good thing after all, and that while those who challenge it aren't necessarily bad people, they are most certainly deluded people, and that if they pig-headedly insist on being deluded even after you have kindly set them straight, then yes, they really are bad people. But either way, bad or merely deluded, they are not to be taken seriously and must eventually be corrected in one way or another. Such is the power of the shibboleth. Such is the power of the fixed idea. So it becomes a serious question whether such people as feminists should enjoy an unlimited license of self-definition or self-interpretation. Why should this thing called feminism be only what these people called feminists would have us believe it is? Are these people called feminists the only people with eyes to see and brains to think? Are they? And are these people called feminists really thick enough to think that the rest of us are so thick that we can draw no intelligent conclusion about what feminism is? They must think we're jolly thick, all right. This concludes Part 1 of the present talk. Part 2 will be given in the recording which follows. Fiedelbogen. Out, 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 place unmercifully open, wider and deeper, until our enemy, keeled over dead. Where do you suppose we ought to strike? Have you got any ideas about that? Well, I have a few. In fact, I believe feminism has many possible Achilles heels. I've thought of several, and today I'd like to examine just one. But I would first remind you of the painfully evident that by its altar of untouchable sanctitude. Secondly, we must inquire to know how we might deactivate the mechanism described in the first part. We begin with a simple observation that the word feminism, just the word, is a shibboleth, a widely held belief that interferes with the ability to speak or think about things without preconception. Hello, Fiedelbogen here. To my fellow workers in the vineyard, worldwide, greetings. Today's talk poses for consideration the question, is feminism a good thing? So, where is feminism's Achilles heel? If we could smite our enemy in just one place, and drill that is not an option. Attack you must, or you will be attacked, and they will slowly, patiently, persistently grind you into sawdust. But you already knew that, didn't you? So, the only way out is forward. We are saddled with the burden of investigation, and the task is twofold. Firstly, we must inquire to know how the world maintains feminism on the rules of the present age. You cannot attack feminism. It is out of bounds to do so, socially prohibited to do so, culturally interdicted to do so. You might as well urinate on the Mona Lisa. Such would be the magnitude of the sacrilege. And yet there is no escape hatch. For to capitulate in despair is not an option. To plead futility is not an option. To turn the other cheek